welcome everybody, and thank you for tuning in. As all of you may remember and recognize me from Hot Topics with Greg Oakes, we will be continuing with that series as we always have. However, we are starting a new series, and this is going to be a very long-term series that I think is going to be extremely beneficial. I personally take great pride in it as the beginning phases of this, and that is going to be a program dedicated to Forest Lake Schools in Action. And to start the show, I wanted to start, I think the best example is to bring the leader of our Forest Lake School Districts into the station and have an opportunity for the community to meet Dr. Matson. Dr. Matson, thank you for coming.
Yes,
I greatly appreciate this. As a kickoff for our community, and as I think what we want to do is, give the community the understanding of what the school district does. It is the biggest employer in our area, and we need to have the people understand when they see their property tax statement that comes in and how much goes to the school district, they're now going to have an understanding of what that money goes for. But I think that we have a very unique opportunity having you as our superintendent because you were born and raised in the Forest Lake area. And I don't know how many people recognize you. I don't know how many people knew that you were born and raised in Forest Lake. I knew that you were here for many years because you had my children in school.
That's right.
Now, with that being said, what I'd like to do is to have you tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us, where you grew up, how you got interested into the education and where you went to school. Just expand on that and let us have a little understanding of who Dr. Linda Matson is.
All right. Well, I grew up in the western edge of the school district in Ham Lake, right on Lexington Avenue. Lived there all of my life. Started first grade in 1965. Attended Forest Lake Elementary for 3 years. And from there, the district was growing, and so Forest View Elementary was built. And so 4th and 5th grade, I was at Forest View Elementary. And as that growth continued, there was a lot of shifting of enrollment and of kids going to different schools. So 6th grade, I attended Linwood Elementary. From there, Southwest Junior High. So I was there for 3 years. Back when I went to junior high, I was one of the first girls that took industrial tech as a class. I think when I was in 8th grade was the first time that girls were allowed to take an industrial tech class. There weren't girls' sports at the junior high when I was there. So Jim Stromberg, who was a social studies teacher and who was the boys' track coach, allowed me to join the boys' track team when I was at Southwest. And then I went to the high school and graduated from the high school in 1977. I had a great time at the high school, took advantage of many of the opportunities there, had great teachers, was involved in student council, in yearbook, volleyball. I was the track captain. So had a great experience at the high school. From there, I went to the University of Minnesota and I had made the decision that I was going to be a teacher. And when I was in high school, I thought about that my favorite subject area was mathematics. So I thought I was going to be a math teacher. But I had a very influential, back then called home economics teacher, Marilyn Orlich. And when I was a senior, she suggested that perhaps I consider teaching home economics. So that's what I did. I enrolled at the University of Minnesota, was on the St. Paul campus for 4 years, and got my degree from the University of Minnesota in home economics and in education. At that point, I student taught at Mariner High School, which was in White Bear Lake, and Mariner at that point had modular scheduling, which some people may remember. So there were sections of classes that you maybe had 100 students in for 45 minutes, and then you'd break those students up, and they would maybe be with you for half an hour, and there'd be 30 kids together. So I taught 6 different preps when I was student teaching, and had a great experience at Mariner. When I graduated in 1981 from the University of Minnesota, I made the decision that I loved teaching at the high school, so I wanted to be a senior high home economics teacher, that I wanted to teach interior design, family living, child development, consumer education. I really didn't want to teach foods and nutrition and clothing construction. And that even though I had a great experience in Forest Lake, I wanted to go somewhere else besides my hometown. So there weren't a lot of jobs in 1981.
No, there wasn't. I would agree with you there. The economy was really in tough shape.
Yeah, it was very difficult. And so I applied many places. And it was in August that I received my first interview 2 weeks before school started. And it was at Forest Lake, teaching junior high foods and sewing. And
I love that one.
And it sounded good, having looked for work all summer. And so I was hired to teach junior high home economics. I also coached track and was the student council advisor. And it was great. I love junior high kids. And I, as I said, had a great time teaching at the high school, but junior high was very rewarding. And I did that for 16 years at Central Junior High, as well as I said, coaching and advising student council, being involved in a lot of district activities, district department chair, building chair, and a lot of different committees. And then I had the opportunity to be part of the mentor program. And Forest Lake has had a mentor program to help guide new teachers since 1986. And so there was a full-time coordinator and a part-time coordinator that were teachers on special assignment that would assist new teachers to the district. And so I taught part-time home economics, and then I was the part-time mentor coordinator. So I did that for a year. It was very rewarding. It was very fun, and you got to see new teachers teaching in a variety of content areas, elementary, junior high, high school. And then the year after that, there was an opportunity to be a curriculum coordinator. So to work in K-12 curriculum, all different content areas. And I was fortunate enough to get that position, so I had that for 3 years and worked with teachers in a variety of ways. And then was able to be the director of teaching and learning, so moved from the classroom and from the teaching ranks to administration, and had that position for 8 years. And then 5 years ago, when Lynn Steenblock said that he was going to retire, had to make a decision about would I apply for the superintendency, and did, and now I'm starting my 5th year as the superintendent in the district. Besides getting my 4-year degree from the University of Minnesota, I also received my master's degree and received my doctorate from there as well.
Now, I was sitting back thinking when you're throwing out these dates. 1965, by the way, is when I graduated from high school. So I mean, that was a little. And back in our high school, it was where I went to school down in Detroit. My graduation class in 1965 was 1,400, and school had over 5,000 kids every day.
Yeah.
So you can imagine the complexities of that with what you're facing on a daily basis here. But the one thing that you had just explained, and I think that this is something I'd like to see us expand on. You had mentioned that you were involved with the mentoring program. Now, even as yourself, you said that you didn't want to get involved when you took your first job. That was the things you didn't want to do, but you ended up doing it. Is that very common, that you get somebody that you hire in and they got great qualifications into a certain area, but you may not have an opening, but you want to provide them an opportunity? And when you get involved with the mentoring program for them, how does the new teacher then grasp a different subject? What do you have to do in order to accelerate them along so that they have an understanding of that? And I'm assuming that kind of happens frequently.
It does, and I think you have to realize too, especially when someone is graduating from college and you think you know what you want to do and who you want to do that with. I mean, you have a very limited scope at that point in your career.
Yes, you do.
So you certainly have an idea, but I do think that does happen because you maybe think that you know exactly what you want, but you're not always going to find that ideal job. And your job is going to change over time if you stay in a district long enough, more than likely. You might teach a different grade level, a different secondary course, that sort of thing. So in Forest Lake, with the mentoring program, and with mentoring programs anywhere, you want to make sure that you formalize the process so that we call them host mentors. So we select a mentor, and we would match up if you're teaching the same, again, grade level content area as much as we can. And then that host mentor really helps guide that person through the first month or two of school. Then the new teacher gets to make a decision about who should be my mentor for the rest of the year. Many times it is that host mentor, but sometimes it's about location, or it could be about style or availability that they might select someone else. And then they work with, and we have different workshops to help teachers. If you look at the research about first-year teachers, or about starting a new position in education, you start in August and September, and then there's this natural dip in November when things are getting difficult. You kind of think, I'm struggling a bit, or I might have some questions about things, and you realize that everyone really does have that dip in November, and then it comes back up as you go towards the end of the year. So we strategically position a workshop in November for our new teachers, because you many times think, I'm all alone, I'm the only one that feels this way, and then you get a group of 20 or 30 new teachers, and lo and behold, everyone feels that way, and that's just kind of that natural process of what happens during the year.
Well, this is something interesting. I was unaware of that, and I think a lot of the communities that we service are not aware of that. What do I want to call that? Sidebar assistance to help them, move forward. One of the things, going back when you were talking about your education, when did you get your doctorate degree?
In 2000.
And what did you get it in?
It was in education, and my dissertation was entitled, "What is it like to be inducted into the profession of teaching?" So it was from that mentoring work that we just talked about that I really had an interest in how does a new professional come into the profession, and what are the experiences they have. Another piece, when I was teaching for 16 years, I was also a cooperating teacher for the University of Minnesota for 10 of those years. So teachers would come, or students that were working on becoming teachers would come out and student teach with me. So 5 of them were the traditional student teaching like I had, which was at the end, usually your spring term of your senior year. And then the university went to a post-baccalaureate program, so a 5th year. So then those students would be with me for the entire year, not every single day, but they'd see the beginning of the year and the middle and the end. So I had that background as well as being part of the mentor program. And so the question that I answered in my dissertation was, what is it like to be inducted into the profession of teaching, and what does that mean for mentoring programs? And that's why I mentioned before that mentoring really has to be intentional. You can't just let that happen. You have to have a plan. There's research that surrounds that really shows how you can best support teachers. And of course, we want to do that. And it's an interesting thing when you're a teacher that you're surrounded by hundreds of kids in a school, a lot of staff members, but many times you feel very isolated, that you don't have someone to talk to because you're with students. And then at the secondary level, the bell rings, you go out and stand in the hallway for 4 or 5 minutes, you go back in and you keep doing that. Lunch is not leisurely. Lunch is, 20 minutes, and then you're back at it again. And so there's a lot of movement, and you see a lot of people, and I think people can have the perception that you're surrounded by people, so you must be interacting and talking, and you are, but you're teaching. And a lot of times, some of the things that you may need as a professional, you may not get unless there's an intentional plan for that.
How long did it take you to get your doctorate degree?
I started taking classes, it was probably 1991 for my doctorate, and then finished in 2000. So I took classes at night in the summer, and then my dissertation took about 3 years, but I worked full-time during that time. So.
Now, when you got your master's degree, when did you get that, and how long did that take to get?
I started my master's right after I got my bachelor's degree. I felt like I needed to have some more background, and I was interested in the content, and so I started taking it right after I graduated in June, with the intention that if I didn't get a job, I probably would have gone back full-time to work on my master's. But I continued taking classes, and I got my master's in 1985.
1985. Okay.
Yeah, so 4 years from when I had received my bachelor's.
Now, at some point in time through the process, or maybe even after you'd gotten your doctorate degree, you must have started thinking that you wanted to pursue administration. Where, when, what precipitated that thought process for you to but to make a turn and start to consider going towards administration?
I think I've been very fortunate in Forest Lake, having a lot of different opportunities. So, teaching junior high for 16 years, I was also very involved in professional organizations as well. So the National Family and Consumer Science or Home Economics Association, and some different things like that. And then had some opportunities that were before me that were interesting and, again, that I was fortunate enough to be part of. So the mentor coordinator, curriculum coordinator, I wasn't exactly sure, or I didn't have a definite goal, I want to be an administrator, but I wanted to continue learning and continue on in what I was doing. So it was kind of a natural progression into the director of teaching and learning position, and Lynn Steenblock was the superintendent that gave me that opportunity to do that. And I felt I could use a lot of the skills that I had learned teaching and being a coordinator. It was a little more seamless maybe than some people as they move from the teaching ranks to an administrative rank. There was probably more of a gradual progression into that.
I see. Now, did you work in any other school district other than Forest Lake?
No.
And how long now have you been in Forest Lake?
This is my 33rd year in the district.
33rd year. All right. And the people don't realize the intensity there is to get postgraduate degrees. Just like my wife always says, why don't you go back and get your master's? Yeah, well, I'm 2 classes short of getting my master's, and I've been, as a matter of fact, 33 years it's been since. And she says, why don't you go back and get it? Well, no, I don't have any. For me, it has no value to get it other than personal gratification. And I've been very fortunate, as you have been, to be able to maneuver through the different opportunities that you can get that are direct teaching, indirect teaching, and involved with administrative side of things. I did too through the business world. So I did have an opportunity, and I do love teaching myself. And I did teach at St. Thomas business class at night, and I always tell everybody I didn't have to go back and get my master's because I got a doctorate degree for the time I was teaching at St. Thomas, issued by the state of Minnesota. And my wife, it just grinds her when I say, oh, what do you mean? I got my doctorate degree. So anyways, but, when you look at that, when did you find time for a social life? When did you find time, by the way, your husband fits into this package someplace? And, you know, and I'm assuming that, you know, he's obviously been extremely supportive to you. And, you know, I can appreciate his desires for your success, and I think that that's marvelous. How long have you been married, and you reside in Forest Lake now, or?
We've been married for 30 years. My husband is Tim Klinkhammer, and we actually live about half a mile from where I grew up. Right.
Boy, you really brought it all back together.
I did. We built a house there 28 years ago, and it's land that my grandparents had and that my mom grew up on. So when you look at and think about not taking time off and getting your master's and your doctorate, I mean, you do have to be focused. There's no question. And you have to be planful about it. And teaching takes a lot of time. The other positions I've had certainly do. But I think being planful and I can focus, I think, pretty well. And so putting those goals out in front of me and kind of charting that course of the classes. A lot of times you'll hear that people have, you know, all of their work done for their doctorate except for their dissertation.
Right.
ABD, all but dissertation. People talk about at the universities, and then of course you're not going to class. It's kind of all up to you. Here it is. There's certain steps, of course, that have to be completed when you're writing a dissertation, and that was great for me. I knew those steps. I just marched along, and there wasn't. And I loved the topic that I was, you know, researching. So that certainly helps as well. But you do have to stay focused and keep at it. That's for sure.
The thing that I know a lot of people don't understand or don't realize that when you go for your doctorate degree, you're assigned a person that you work with very closely to put it all together and to proceed after your dissertation. But then I don't think people realize that the very person that was your mentor then becomes the critic.
Yes.
And then you have to, over a period of time, you create a very comfortable relationship with these people, and then all of a sudden, then you got to make sure that the viper doesn't bite you, you know, so to say. And how long, as far as what was your mentor involved with you? Did you get her right from day one when you started, or how did that process work?
Yeah, I did. Jane Pleehall was my advisor at the University of Minnesota for my doctorate. She was also in her first year at the university in 1981, and she was the one that came out when I student taught at Mariner and was the person from the university that supervised me. So I had a long history with her.
Well, that's very good.
It was.
That's very good.
It was great. And so she was with me the entire time, and you're correct. They do push you to make sure that you are, you know, you have those strong research skills and that you're taking the courses that you need, and getting that dissertation to the point where you can defend it. At the University of Minnesota, your written prelims are in 3 different areas, so you come in 3 different days, and back then it was the blue book, so you'd be given a blank tablet, so to speak. You'd have 1 or 2 or 3 questions, and you'd have 2 hours, and you'd sit in a room and write without any notes. And then you'd come back and do that for 3 different days, and then they assess that. Sometimes you have to come back and redo something, and sometimes you don't. And then the oral prelims are about, here's my research topic, here's what I've done so far, here's what I'm proposing as my own research. They ask a lot of questions there, and you pass or fail that. And then you go out and do your research, and then you're presenting your research, and then they vote on that. And it certainly isn't an automatic. There are people that don't pass, that have to go back. I think the easiest part, I think people maybe would view that the most difficult part would be at the end, the very last piece. That's the easiest because you are so immersed in your research and what you have done that It's very, I think it's difficult not to know the answers unless you've done something research-wise that isn't sound. But being able to talk about the topic and to talk about what you've read, what you've found out, it's pretty natural.
Digressing a little bit now, going back into your teaching side of things, I'm sure that you've had an opportunity to be exposed to various awards, statewide awards, things of this nature. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, in 1990, I was selected as the Minnesota Home Economics Teacher of the Year, which was a great honor and an exciting honor.
Sure is.
I was fairly young to receive that award, and more often than not, it's a senior high teacher versus a junior high teacher that receives that. And then that goes on to a national level. And so I was one of the top 3 in the country then that year as well.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, that's a big deal.
Thanks.
That's a very big deal, and I think that's wonderful that what it shows in the community of what actually is going on in the schools. Now, how many superintendents have you resided under since you have been gainfully employed in Forest Lake School District?
Well, Dr. Bartell was the first superintendent when I was hired. So he was there, and I believe he retired after my first year. So I really didn't have much interaction with him. Jerry Brindelson was next and was there. And, in 1981 was when Forest Lake was on strike. And so, and actually we were on split shifts at the junior high. So I taught in the morning from 6:30 to 12:30. We started that at the beginning of the year, and then in October went on strike for 3 weeks. So after that, Dr. Brindelson came in and really, I think, worked very hard to kind of mend some of those fences. There are some difficulties, of course, that happened during a strike, and there were many strikes in 1981 across Minnesota.
Yeah, nationally too.
Yes.
Nationally too.
And so he did a great job, I think, of really trying to move the district forward with administration, with teachers, with classified staff. So he, I think, worked very hard at that and was very successful at that. Dr. Rubel was next, and I was able to work with him a bit on some strategic planning pieces back then. He also was very interested in bringing in different programs. He was the one that brought the orchestra program, for example, into the district. And then Lynn Steenblock was here, and as I mentioned before, he was the one that hired me as the Director of Teaching and Learning, and I worked very closely with him at the district office for those 8 years that I was in that position.
A little sidebar, a very good friend of mine was Jack Reese.
Oh, yes.
And the other one was Cliff Butler.
Okay, yep.
And in 1981, we would go deer hunting out in Wyoming over Thanksgiving, and we'd leave Wednesday night. As soon as school was out, I'd have the car packed. These guys come roaring home because we lived over by both of them. They'd be in the house and out in 10 minutes, and we'd be going down the road. And all the way out there, they were talking about it. Finally, I said to them, we're just about into Deadwood. I said, I have had it. I don't want to hear another thing about the strike. About the strike. I said, forget it. So anyways, we were laughing, and all kinds of stuff went on. But they were both very good friends of mine, and it was, that was, I think we did maybe, I'd be willing to bet we went out there 10 times. So every year at Thanksgiving, we would take off and go out there. So it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. Okay, and, in concluding today's show, the one question I have for you is that you had some pretty, I would say, very strong personalities and very intellectual superintendents that you have followed. In the process, you, for no better description, saw the good, the bad, and the ugly of all of them. In the process of embracing the knowledge that you have from there, what has given you some insight on how you now are doing the short-term and long-term goals that you personally have viewed and you'd like to see where the school district is going? What did they give to you as tools to help you? Because you just don't go from a teacher to the superintendent. I mean, and you got to have, there's you got a big cake dough here, and you got all the pieces and everything, so.
Well, I think the one piece that Dr. Brindelson, when I look back at his work, was really the relationships that he had, I think, in the community, but also internally with the different employee groups. So I think he worked very hard on that. He needed to do that, but he was also very skilled at that. So I think that's one piece that's really important. Dr. Rubel looked ahead to what kind of programming might there be. It wasn't overwhelmingly a yes that we start the orchestra program, but he felt it was important. He said, we're doing this because he felt it was, and we moved ahead. So to have that vision to look ahead, and sometimes you can't get everyone on board, but you do need to take the lead. And Lynn Steenblock, I certainly worked more closely with him than with anyone. And I did my internship with him as I got my superintendent's license. I got that after, actually I received that in 2003. So my plan wasn't to necessarily be a superintendent. The reason I got my license was to have more background in law, in finance, in school finance, and to also see the bigger picture and how teaching and learning fit into that bigger picture. Because I think if you can see that bigger picture and know your spot in it, you can help the organization. So he gave me the opportunity for that internship. He gave me the opportunity to see a lot of different pieces of the organization and how that works, working with the school board, working with other directors, with principals, with teachers, with clerical staff, bus drivers, etc. And he really started a lot of different systems within the school district that we didn't have in place. For example, in teaching and learning, we did not have a curriculum review process. So looking at what we're teaching and how we teach it and systematically reviewing that, there wasn't a process in place until Lynn arrived. And that was one of the things that I was charged with, was to complete that. So looking at what systems need to happen, and then providing the support and the tools to get that completed. So he really helped me with that. In addition, I would say the other person for me personally in the district was Donley Johnson. I
know him well.
Yeah, I signed my first contract with Donley, and taught with Kathy, and their children were students in my classroom. But Donley very much encouraged me to continue on professionally, helped with that when I was doing my research for my doctorate in the school district, was supportive of that, and really has helped guide me along the way, and is a great person to talk to about different situations, looking at them from different points of view. There isn't, always just one right way, but many right ways, and it depends on the community, the context, all of those things. So those superintendents certainly gave me, things to ponder, to think about, to consider. Again, certainly more closely with Lynn, because we, worked together at the district office. But then I would also have to say Donley Johnson too was key in my professional life.
Are you aware that Donley was on the board of directors here at the TV station?
Yes.
There you go.
Yes, I was.
Yeah, he was up until probably, I think 8-10 years ago maybe. Mm-hmm. And our kids had Kathy, and Kathy taught them too, so we got to know them fairly well also. Yeah. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to close out this session, and as we had talked, we are going to be doing a program that is going to be very lengthy, and I think that the opportunities that we have to present to the community for all the good, positive direction that this school district has gone in, and where it's at today, where it was, and where it's going in the future, is going to be, I think, important for the public at large to understand. As like city council, things happen and you just go, how in the world can something like that happen? Well, there's processes and there's laws and there's a lot of things that go into making some of these things happen. And my attitude is that when I was on city council, 40% on any one issue didn't like me, 40% liked me, and 20% were ambivalent. And then that same 40 and 40 flipped, and they were then my allies as well as, so I mean, it doesn't really matter. So, understanding that, I think that the population needs to understand how the functionality of the school board. And with our plans coming up for the future, I think is going to be very fascinating, very interesting. We're going to be coming up for the viewing public. We're going to be touring schools. We're going to be interviewing some of the teachers, some of the principals. We're going to be talking athletics. We're going to be talking everything that is involved. We're going to be talking about finances. We're going to have someone give us, probably Larry Martini, give us an understanding of how accounting practices are in schools, because it's different than anything else, and and how you get your money, and how and when do you get your money, and then sometimes you don't get your money, you don't get your money, But at the same token, all this is going to be brought forward. So I truly hope that everyone had a wonderful opportunity today to find out who Dr. Linda Matson is, get a little bit of her background, have a good, solid understanding, and I think that predicated on that, she will be back. We will be continuing on, but many other people will be coming forward. So thank you all for viewing, and stay tuned for our next episode. And Dr. Matson, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Okay.